Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies, there's a lag in my PC for a moment. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on how to build a bank that Filipinos love. Special thanks to the speakers for taking the time to share their views with us and Backbase for sponsoring this webinar. Now, nearly all initiatives done within banks these days are centered around delivering superior experiences for customers, whether it's to retain existing customers or to acquire new ones. As we transition to a digital first world, the dynamics of our customer engagement have, of course, been shifted dramatically as well. Banks nowadays need to take a holistic view on how to design the customer experience, both in the physical and digital world as well. Today, we are joined by leaders from the Philippines banking industry to discuss the tools, philosophies, and strategies on how to build banks that customers will love. I'm pleased to be joined by right on top there, we have Eugene, who is the president and CEO of RCBC. Below Eugene, we have Rachel, who is the chief growth officer for Tyme. Below Rachel, we have Riddhi. Riddhi is the regional head for ASEAN and South Asia and Backbase. Last but not least, below him, we have Paolo. Paolo is the Senior Vice President and the Special Assistant to the President on the Digital Bank Initiative with the Philippine National Bank. Folks, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, customer experience, customer satisfaction has changed in the digital world that we live in today, right? So maybe you can walk us through what are some changes that you have observed about delivering customer experience, customer engagement in this digital world. Maybe we can start with Eugene. Eugene, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vincent.
You're most
Appreciate
welcome.
this. There was a time when us bankers were compared, at least favorably, to having a root canal in the dental clinic. Not exactly the best comparison to make. But recently, as we've made huge strides in improving customer experience, we've also realized that the bar has gone higher. As customers have become digital, they've become also much more global in their outlook. The standards for great service are now Amazon, Netflix, and whatever their favorite app is. So banks are no longer compared with other banks. We're now held to a very high standard. It's like having local movies compared to the Korean novellas, as I would say. Okay, that's the first observation. The second observation is good news about their services and feedback travels fast, but bad news and complaints about our service travels much, much faster through social media. So we just have to watch out. There's very little room to maneuver. We just have to pay much closer attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. And I think it's a good point that you've brought up, right? At the end of the day, banks aren't measured against other banks these days. You're measured against other really digital first players that don't even have the shackles of regulations that banks do. So at the end of the day, we really need to be able to outcompete some of these folks out there as well. Thanks for that, Eugene. Let's move on to Rachel. How has driving customer satisfaction shifted into this environment from your observation?
Well, since we're a digital bank and we started our first bank in South Africa about 3.5 years ago, we've always been digital and we've always been thinking about customers and how to get customers to engage with us because we're a new entity in South Africa and we'll be a new entity in the Philippines. Though, actually, what we think is really important is our model, which is high tech and high touch. So we're digital, which means that in the back end, everything's digital. We have no paper. We actually have practically no pens in Tyme in any of our offices. Our customers don't deal with paper. But actually, we think that there still is an element of touch that's important. And people, I think one of the things from the pandemic that we've all learned is that while you working at home is good, also people really like people. And anytime any country opened up again, everybody rushed out to see each other. And everybody rushed across borders to see family when they could. So we actually think that our model, which includes both the digital part, but having ambassadors in the grocery stores that we work in and having digital kiosks for onboarding that are really easy to use and where people actually go, makes it a really interesting model for this time period. When we hear about Netflix, Amazon, TikTok, all of these are super interesting and fun to use, and our customers love using them. But I really think it's a little different when it's a bank. Trust is so important. When it's about money, it's a little different than watching or putting up like a TikTok video. And so we know that our customers actually want to make sure that we exist, that we're real. And doing things like having cards, having the kiosks, make us look a little bit more realer and add that trust. So that's an aspect that's different from those other mediums, and why banking is so important to get right, because it's dealing with people's livelihoods, it's dealing with their savings. And in the end, trust is the most important aspect.
Thanks. Yeah, of course, good points over there, right? We need to think about the experience both from the digital and the physical side of things, and trust is important for the banking financial services. All good points that we could perhaps dive into a bit later as well. Thanks for that, Rachel. And Riddhi, any thoughts on the topic?
No, I think what Eugene said, right, that
Mm.
the bad
Oops,
news
I
travels
think.
faster, and we have
Oh
we've
yeah,
seen that quite often, not
yeah.
just in the Philippines but also across the region. Where, yeah, can you hear me? Is that okay?
We were struggling for a moment, but it's clear now. Go ahead, Riddhi.
Okay, so what I was saying is that, going back to Eugene's point, that the bad news travels faster, and I think we have seen that quite often. And uh, what we as platform
We seem to have
providers or
lost you again,
tell
Riddhi.
banks and talk to banks is about.
Maybe
Okay,
we'll
can you
move
go
on.
to Paolo first, and
Yeah,
probably I'll just come
maybe
back.
you
I'll just sort
refresh and
out my
then we'll go
network
to
issue. I'm
Paolo.
having
Yeah,
a bad day.
okay, no worries.
Yeah,
Paolo, maybe,
sorry,
yeah, you can share
sorry
your
for that.
thoughts. No worries, Riddhi. Paolo, you have the floor.
Yeah, good morning, Vincent, and thank you for having me here in this webinar. Well, the tolerance for inefficiency, negligence, and absurdity, as far as bankers are concerned, is really now at a very all-time low, right? As people have become mentally drained because of the pandemic, and obviously being gravitating towards digital, that tolerance has actually gone to at a very low level. Um, However, on a positive note, when you talk about customer satisfaction, customer experience, you're no longer talking about just providing a good experience or an expected experience. Um, the customers, for you to be able to retain them and for them to continue to patronize you, we should be giving them an unbelievable customer experience. Now, how is that defined? It depends on how well you know your customer. So it's not something that you can read in a book or something that you can compare against another bank. So um, those 2 points, the tolerance and or basically the intolerance, and trying to achieve an unbelievable customer experience.
And to your point on the intolerance, is that these days, with digital onboarding enabled, it's a lot easier for customers to shift banks, right? Which makes it even more important for banks to deliver the right kind of experience to retain their customers. So, some good points brought up over there. I think for now, Riddhi might still be experiencing some issues with his connection. So maybe, we'll move on to the next topic, and we'll jump back when he's back. Let's move back on to Eugene. Now, Eugene, as the CEO of the bank, of course, you look at multiple things, right? From the tech of the company, the P&L, the culture, the full works. So for RCBC, beyond just digital technologies, what are some core tenets that your organization has in relation to, delivering customer experience that are superior or unbelievable experience, as Paolo would put it?
Maybe what I can mention now that we've really spent a lot of investments and time on is data science and analytics. Nowadays we always look for data to support our assertions, conclusions, and even campaigns. In the past, when bankers used to believe their gut feel or go with their gut feel, we don't do that anymore. We insist on data supporting gut feel. Usually, they often are together, are congruent, but uh, the best part is data and analytics tools have enabled us to identify customer personas, create finely sliced segments, and have enabled us to customize offerings to these finely sliced segments. So really, maybe the first thing I'd say is belief in data. The second thing is, and this is always mentioned by everyone, it's customer obsession. In the past, innovation would typically happen within the four walls of the bank. Somebody has a bright idea, starts working on it. Now we follow a process. I'm sure the other companies are doing something similar. Innovation, as we always say, has to have empathy. And for it to have empathy, it has to start with a customer journey map, go through all the highs and lows, go through the pains and pleasure points. And whenever we come up with something new, we always test it with the customer. If there's anything that's shown to me that's never tested with the customer, I send it back. It's now a religion, basically. And related to this, customer complaints to me are another religion. It's one thing to say, listen to the customer, but I think the better part is to go over the trends, the specific complaints, and do the old Toyota style root cause analysis to fix to identify the problem. The good news is the solution is often digital. We have a few examples where digital solutions basically just not fix the problem simply, but it also creates a more pleasurable way or delightful way of addressing it. Sorry for the long answer, Vincent. But
No, it's all good.
many new things are happening.
But for sure, right? I think it has shifted from relying on a gut feel to data, but data also supports whether the gut feel is correct or not, and it could save a lot of pains before fully committing to a whole project. So that's something as well. It seems that Riddhi is back. Riddhi, back to the earlier question. We're talking about how customer satisfaction has changed in the digital environment, right? And you've got some observations for us.
Yeah, so I hope it works this time around, guys. Okay, sorry for the inconvenience earlier. So, Vincent, talking about customer satisfaction, I think recently last year, Forrester and Backbase, we did a small survey centered around financial wellness. So we picked up financial wellness as a theme, and we reached out to customers across the region, not just Philippines. And we got some very interesting insights that came out of that entire report. Okay, and one of the points that came out is that customers across the board are struggling with some of the basics when it comes to banking. They are struggling, and I'm not going to quote the exact data points, but the broader themes that they were struggling with was, how do I save, how do I invest, and how do I pay my bills on time? I think these were the top three things that came out across countries, from Philippines to Malaysia to Vietnam, Indonesia. We sort of went across, and these were the main three themes that came out. And then when we went a level deeper, we realized that customers are not having enough when it comes to saving tools, when it comes to budgeting tools, and it comes to financial advice. So you can see a correlation that customers are struggling on certain things and customers are looking for certain things, and there's an immediate gap there. Now, what Eugene was saying, right? Test it out with the customers, and I think we have also been doing that with a few of our banks that we work with, where it's not just about talking about customer journeys as one single offering for all types of customers. It's about going out in the market, doing those interviews with the customers, because the needs of a sole proprietor versus the needs of, let's say, a customer who is more family oriented versus the Gen Zs and the millennials are all different, right? And I think that's where that customer testing comes very handy. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that if you correlate what the customer is looking for, what the customer is struggling with, and go out in the market and try to find out what exactly they aspire to do, I think then the customer experience or whatever we talk about from a technology perspective, from a platform perspective, becomes much easier. I always say this, that technology and platforms and solutions like ours are always going to be an enabler. It's always the business process that needs to drive it. Technology is always going to drive the business process that's going to be decided. And I think that's where the main focus should be. So yeah, some of those initial thoughts, but I'm pretty sure as we go along today, there will be more discussions that we'll be having around them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And a lot of this are the customer's major milestones in life, right? Savings, financial planning, and whatnot. And then earlier, Eugene kind of compared, going to the bank as an experience of like worse than having a root canal. So that kind of experience comparison shouldn't be the case, right? Because banks do play an important role. So maybe later we can kind of dive into how banks can play a more positive role in the customer's life journey. But before that, let's move back to Rachel and Paolo. Rachel, what are some core tenets, core strategies, core beliefs that you guys have in Tyme when it comes to delighting customers or working towards delighting customers?
Yeah, so at Tyme, we believe in old Sufi saying that says you can only walk from where you stand. And that means we need to meet our customers where they are on their digital journey. And most of our customers, yes, as Riddhi was saying, their knowledge of financial matters is quite low. Even no, it doesn't matter the level of education, just the comfort feeling can be very different on financial matters. So that's why when we thought about how to design Tyme, it was important for us to design it with our ambassadors who are in the retail stores where we have the onboarding happening. And the ambassadors do not help with the onboarding. They then, after the customer has opened an account, they show them how to download the app. They show them how to use all the features in that app. And they help them kind of even walk through the first activation and initiation into using the account. And that initial kind of education is the fundamental way that we onboard and help our customers to actually engage with us and to start being part of the overall Tyme family. Now, the second tenet that we have is that people don't wake up in the morning and think, oh, today I want to go get a bank account. It's not a destination. It's not a holiday event, right? So you need to manufacture that. And that's why we, as part of one of our kind of core fundamental parts of Tyme, is that we integrate into retail systems and retail infrastructure. This is because when someone goes to a store, whether it's a grocery store or a retail store, they're thinking about a transaction. They're thinking about making, spending money, using money. And so it's involved with the whole idea of finance. And that's why we have installed our kiosks inside the stores so that people are already in the kind of mindset to think about this. And that's what a great place to actually manufacture that first interaction. Now we've actually moved forward and created mobile kiosks that we take to, church congregations in South Africa, taxi stops, large employers, but still we try to integrate this whole feel of what is a transaction that people are already in the mindset before while they're doing and using and starting to think about the account, rather than hoping that they'll just wake up in the morning and think, today I'm going to go get a bank account, which we have tried, and we know that that is definitely not part of someone's kind of morning steps that they're thinking about.
I'd be very concerned for that person if he or she wasn't excited. But Rachel, very quickly, just a quick follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
How does that translate to what you guys would be doing in Philippines? Just very quickly.
Well, in South Africa, we started our operations in a partnership, but it was a commercial partnership with Pick and Pay and Boxer. However, we're very happy because in the Philippines, GoTyme is part of the overall family of the Go Conway Group and JG Summit. So we will be deploying those kind of freestanding and mobile kiosks throughout the whole Go Conway and conglomerates. They're all of their holdings, including JG Summit, Robinson's Retail, the different malls. JG Summit is an ideal partner for us, and we will be using ambassadors in South Africa. We recruit our ambassadors, and they're part of a field agency. Then we recruit through job programs, and I think we want to do the same thing in the Philippines. So that is part of it. But in Cebu Pacific, which is part of the Go Conway conglomerate, in the Go Conway group, says that they want to be serving the everyone as part of Cebu Pacific's line, and we want to be doing the same. We want to be serving the everyone as part of banking services and offering high quality banking products to the everyone in the Philippines.
Very cool. Thanks for that, Rachel. Let's move on to Paolo. Now, Paolo, now what is the strategy? What's the game plan? What's the core tenet over at the Philippine National Bank when it comes to delighting customers?
Well, one thing that we shouldn't do is be too obsessed with what my competitor bank is doing and not to copy it. They're not necessarily correct, right? So uh, it's good to know what your competitor is doing, but not be too obsessed in basing your decisions on what and just if one bank did it, then we should also do it. That's one. Number two, we should also be very cognizant of what you call brand permission and brand affinity. Do the customers like your brand? All right. Do the customers gravitate toward your brand? Because if there is this fundamental dislike about your brand, no matter how good your customer journey is, there is some sort of resistance, right? And thirdly is um, the world doesn't revolve around your brand. You are not the center of the universe for the customer. So do not insist, for example, that if you now go into uh, let's say a mobile app, no, and you keep on insisting that the customer should just simply just keep on using your mobile app and not anything else. You should be aware that there's a trend towards the open finance framework, right? And you let the customer choose which channel he wants to go to, but be sure that you're there. So those are the things that we need to kind of shift our mindset to, that we cannot demand customers to go to our branch. We cannot demand customers to just use us, because there's always the choice that the customers can make.
Sure, and we design the experiences around our customers' preferences, and some good points over there about not being too obsessed with competitors. Sometimes it's very easy to fall into that trap. And these are some good key learnings for some of our audience member tuning in today. Now, let's move back on to Eugene. Now, Eugene, earlier you compared banking experience to the anecdote of getting a root canal, which nobody wants, right? But how do we try to create a more positive kind of role in our customers' life, particularly with financial management goals, their life journey, as Riddhi has brought up earlier?
Yeah, maybe just to
Mm,
go back to that comparison.
sure.
I'm happy to share that we compared favorably against the root canal experience. I think we were 2 levels better. Not so bad, but still the comparison is terrible. Now there are certain things that we can do digitally. There are some things that we cannot. I think it's similar to what Rachel mentioned earlier, where there has to be some level of high touch at some point. Um, take the case of estate planning. Estate planning is very difficult to create in a digital environment. So what we are trying to do is build a partially face-to-face, and partial digital. So in our case, for example, we have a whole team that does face-to-face advice, but uh, after that, the entire investment experience, opening a trust fund account, doing the onboarding, the suitability and appropriateness exercise, the monitoring of investments later, and even the redemption can be done in a fully digital or fully online manner. Um, so that's, to me, to the extent that we can create digitally, we will. But there's just certain things that we cannot. The other thing that we always think about, and maybe it's a cultural thing for us, is we always believe that our customers look for purpose. Nowadays, especially with the young people, or even our employees, they like talking about climate change, for example. It has become a very passionate advocacy. So we've been trying to build certain experiences in our bank where such advocacies can be furthered by our customers using products that we built for them. So, for example, a simple green time deposit where the proceeds are used to fund renewable energy projects. So many of those things that we try to do to marry purpose plus digital experience as much as we possibly can. Maybe those are the two things I can share for now. But I'm just this early. I'm happy to be hearing about the insights from my fellow panelists. I am making notes. Thank you.
Surely, thanks for that, Eugene. It sounds like to me beyond just the life milestone for the customers, you also look at how to align your brand's values with your customers as well. So that's definitely an important point to consider for banks. Let's move on to Rachel. What can banks do to have a more positive impact on major milestones in life for customers, whether it's like getting their first car or the first home, or maybe getting a business loan to expand their small and micro business? How can banks play a more positive role?
Well, I think first in the Philippines, if you look at kind of broadly, there are a number of, the percentage of underserved or unbanked, but particularly underserved people in the Philippines is quite high. And while it seems that a lot of Filipinos have a bank account or they have an e-wallet, they're not having access to what we consider high quality banking that's done in a very easy way. So, I think, and then often we're asked, what is that one thing that the customers really want? What is that one product? We actually don't believe that there's one product that a bank should have that is kind of their theme product. We actually think that you need to have a breadth of products that are high quality, easy to use, and allow customers to kind of grow and expand what they're doing with a bank. So we try to have, think about customer experience in that, how is it easy to actually do different things on the app? How is it easy to download it, not taking that much bandwidth? Those are all things that we think are important for our customers early on to learn. Secondly, as a digital bank, digital banks cannot manufacture tons and tons of products. We just don't have the structures in the same way as, I would say RCBC, BDO. We have to, so what we do is we manufacture some products that we know we're really good at, and one that Tyme is excellent at is helping people learn how to save. So we have very specific ways they're gamify to teach savings. But we want to offer more than what we manufacture, so we do a lot with third-party products. In South Africa, we have partnerships with very interesting insurance companies, and we just recently launched Tyme Health, which is a health insurance product that's quite innovative for our customer segment in South Africa. And in the Philippines, we will be partnering, of course, with the different parts, for example, on selling a number of products from Robinsons Bank, but other types of partnerships as well, so that we can offer that breadth of high quality banking that's really important. So I just want to call out Eugene, because I think what you're talking about with climate is great. Before I joined Tyme and I was with IFC, I went to the Philippines many times and worked on climate. And I've always applauded what the Philippines does on that. And when I think of the different banks doing climate, I think it's really exciting. There are a number of kind of interesting new fintech kind of B2C, B2B products coming out that are really exciting. And I think that that's going to be really interesting to see how the Philippines, which is such a climate hit country, then can actually roll this out for customers. So I think you've also given me some great ideas too.
Certainly, I think ESG climate is such a big topic, right? I think we could all spend a couple of hours really diving into this topic. Yeah, but thanks for some of those key pointers. I guess focus on what you're good at is some of the key takeaways from what you said earlier, right? Let's move on to Riddhi, and of course, Riddhi, this is really at the core some of the key solutions that Backbase do offer, right? So I think you probably have a lot of thoughts around this subject. So you have the floor, Riddhi.
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about, how can banks play a more positive role? I think, Vincent, we were talking about this last week as well, right? That nowadays, quite often what we are seeing is that, and I saw this yesterday with a bank in the Philippines, I don't want to name them, they launched a separate app for just onboarding new customers. And I think that is where things start to go wrong. How many apps are you launching? How many products are you launching? Are you trying to give more products and services to customers, or are you in that process you're ending up confusing those customers? What the entire customer life? I think I lost again, but I'm back on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Yeah,
now.
sorry.
Go
So
ahead. Go ahead.
sorry. So as I was saying, right, if you break up the entire customer life cycle into four broad areas, right, from the onboarding, which is probably a given nowadays, uh, to how do you do customer servicing, uh, uh, how you're talking about engagement and loyalty, and then finally how you're talking about more cross sell, upsell, and originating new products. In an ideal world, and that's where platforms like Backbase do come in, is can you do this entire orchestration? It could be different applications, it could be different touch points. Going back to what Paolo was saying, right? I mean, you really cannot force people to use your mobile app. It's all about just servicing the customer at any touch point. It could be the mobile app, it could be a kiosk in a mall, as Rachel was saying, or it could be the branch as well. I mean, there is no sense to not believe that a branch is not digital. A branch is also a digital form, if you look at it that way. So it's all about, can the customer's context, wherever the customer is, it could be at their home, at the branch, somewhere else. But do I have the context of the customer, and can I service the customer in that same seamless manner that I could service the customer probably when I'm there face to face with him or her? And I think that is where these entire orchestration engines, orchestration platforms come into the picture, because we are not talking about siloed point applications anymore, which is like a mobile app, an online app, or a branch. It's about, forget the channels. A customer is going to interact with you in multiple places. Just ensure that you're orchestrating all of that from one single horizontal layer that cuts across all channels, all lines of businesses, all segments of the customer journey, and so on and so forth. So I think that is where, if and I'm not very cognizant about let's say what Paolo is doing or what Rachel is doing or with what Eugene is doing in their individual banks, but if banks try to follow that approach where a channel is just a channel, don't really bother about the channel, just bother about the context of the customer, bother about the orchestration of the data. And I think that's where the major focus should be, more than just designing the channels in a beautiful or in a jazzy manner.
I think that's a salient point, right? No matter what channel you engage with your customer, the experience have to be consistent, right? You can't have like really good digital services and then walking into the branch is a nightmare for service, right? So that kind of consistency has to exist. And, as Rachel said earlier, different customers have different preferences when it comes to interactions in channels, right? First cities might be different, second cities might be different, Gen Z might be different. Some might want to go in the branch, some might want to do it in the metaverse. So who knows, right? As long as we deliver the right experience across the channels. Thanks for that. Let's move on to Paolo. Paolo, what are your thoughts on the topic?
Okay. On the positive milestones. All right. So
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
if I, as a bank, am not helping my customers achieve their aspirations or fulfill their dreams, might as well just stop what I'm doing right now, because everything I've been doing now will be useless. So go back to the drawing board, because I will not be able to positively affect my customers if I'm not helping them achieve, as I said, their aspirations and fulfill their dreams. I can do a lot of things. I can do press releases, I can do a lot of advertising, but it's not going to hit to the core. It's not going to move the needle if I'm not going to help. And
Very short and strong point over there, right? If it's not meeting those goals, let's go back to the drawing board and see how we can fix it. Now, before we move on to the next question, there is some question from the audience. Maybe we can take one first. Jean is saying over there that 75% of Filipinos found it difficult to open an account due to documentary requirements, and this is from BSP survey in 2019. The numbers might be different now. So Jean wants to know if there's anything the sector could do to kind of smoothen this onboarding process. Yes, Paolo, you'd like to go? Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just scratching my ear. Anyway,
Oh, okay, might as well.
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. A subtle way of saying I'll be first. All right. Anyway, no. I mean, it's so easy to open an account now, right? I mean, during the pandemic, a lot of banks now started to offer opening an account through the app. And it just required you taking a picture of your ID, and that's it. Unfortunately, fraudsters also took advantage of that. Uh, Very, very bad, really. So, in terms of being able to open an account, again, the answer is now not much is needed. You have Gcash, which has 40 million customers. You know, I don't know though if they're all live, but they're 40 million. Um, but the point here is, in terms of regulation, we need to ensure that although we can make it easy for customers to open an account, we also have to ensure that we have the proper measures in place so that this will not be taken advantage of by the fraudsters. And I just wanted to insert this quickly. Whether you're a digital bank or a regular bank doing digital stuff, the customer's aspiration that my money is safe doesn't change. All right. And therefore, when you talk about my money is safe, you're not just simply talking about the bank being financially stable. It's actually the bank being fraud free and not being the target of fraudsters. So um, I think we should take that into consideration that as we go towards more being more digital, the responsibility of keeping the money of our customers safe is paramount. And I think, and once we've shown that, then we also offer this way for customers to be able to conveniently open an account. Then that bodes well for the industry.
There's
Yeah.
no worse experience than losing money, right? So, of course, that's
Yes.
an important consideration. Yes, Rachel, you'd like to take the question as well?
Yes, so we have worked with BSP, and we
Mm.
actually started talking to them before we even applied for the license about this onboarding process. So we will be installing our digital kiosks as well as using our mobile kiosks across the Philippines and installing them first into the Robinsons retail stores. You're going to be able to walk in and open a bank account in 5 minutes. It's a full bank account. And then from the kiosk, you'll get a personalized debit card. And the kiosk is doing all of the AML, all the KYC, all of the checks. We have worked through that whole process, adapted it from South Africa, but it's going to be similar and the efficiency will be similar as well. So once you receive the debit card, then you can then walk over to the cash register at the Robinsons retail store and then do cash in, cash out right there and activate the card. So we think that while the app is going to be used eventually, you also get the card to start off, and then you have the ambassador who helps you download the app and shows you how to use that. Now, while we talk a lot about downloading apps, our experience in South Africa is that only 20% of our almost 5 million customers have onboarded just by downloading an app, and 80% have come in through the kiosks. Also, that 20% only came in through clicking through on digital advertising, which has gotten really expensive. So it's actually quite low cost for us to be using the kiosk as well. The point of cybersecurity is really important, and we've spent, in South Africa, of course, we've had 3.5 years of using our technology to perfect all of this. Not that we've had issues there on this, but we want to make sure it's very secure, because what our founder always says is the fraudsters only have to be right once, and we have to be right every 24 hours a day, every second of every day. We have to be right, which is why we put a huge amount of time and effort into making sure all of our cybersecurity is, world class, or we are creating world class with that.
Very true. Thanks for that, Rachel. Now let's shift gears and move back to the conversation of data, right? Because I think Eugene did mention earlier that there's a shift from relying on gut to relying on data. So how is RCBC leveraging data to provide the
Vince,
better customer
sorry,
experience?
Vince, maybe I
Yes,
can be last this time and the others answer first.
sure, no worries. Riddhi, do you want to go first? Let's talk about how banks can use data to deliver better customer experiences.
Yeah, sure. I'll probably give a slightly
Sure,
generic context, and then Eugene, Paolo, and Rachel can add on.
sure.
So I think uh, I spoke about the 4 pillars of the customer life cycle, right? And the third pillar, which is around loyalty and engagement, and that's where data comes in very handy. And what are we talking about when we're talking about loyalty and engagement? It's about deriving the data that you know about what the customer is doing, where are they doing the things, and probably sort of using that data to sort of uh, drive two broad areas. One is, can I sell more as a bank to that particular customer based on what they're doing, and second, can I service them better? Now, how are you going to do that? Again, going back to my point around platforms and orchestration, uh, you don't need to go into, and that's our belief, you don't need to go into where the world, you keep on hearing about AI, about machine learning. It's really not as complicated as that. If you really use data in a very simple way of, some of us who have done computer programming in our earlier lives, we have used these terms of if and then, that if something happens, then you do something else, right? And you can use simple data, and you can use that if then clause in a real world scenario to set up those rules, to set up those engagement touch points, that if a customer is, giving a hypothetical scenario, if an SME customer is going to go cash negative in the next 3 months, can I offer a line of credit to that customer, right? So that is contextual credit. That is giving credit to the customer at that particular point of time, because you know that he or she needs that credit. Similarly, if you know, and if you, because you would be doing all this budgeting and financial planning, if you know that a customer is about to hit their budgets at the 5th of the month, at the 6th of the month, the person might need an overdraft. The person might need a personal loan. So all that data is there within the bank. It's about how do you use it, as simple as that. And as I said, right, it just needs application of very simple computer programming language, if then, and then do this. So I think going back to my point of that one unified customer orchestration and that engagement orchestration platform, that is where it becomes handy, because you're not just talking about the customer experience and that engagement at the branch or in the mobile app or in the call center. You're talking about the customer context and that experience across their entire life cycle. And that's where the data comes in, and that's how you do use the data. And we are seeing a lot of banks that are working with Backbase, and even not working with Backbase, using these technologies and sort of uh, deriving and using data to derive more and more customer engagement, customer loyalty, and so on and so forth.
Thanks for those examples, Riddhi. Now, let's move on to Paolo. Any examples you'd like to share with us in terms of how data is being leveraged in PNB?
Well, first off, even your basic data is not being taken, if it's being not being
Mm.
leveraged on, right? So why look for other data when you cannot even analyze whatever you have now? And we're not the top bank, right? We are like rank 4 or 5. So jokingly, maybe I can just look at the data by the complaints of my customers for my 3 other banks above me, work on it, and then get their own customers, right? So I wouldn't really want to look far. I mean, I don't even want to look. I don't even want to know what's the color of the shirt of my customer right now. It's not even relevant to me. So baby steps. Look at what I have right now. See what I can glean from it. Maximize it, and then as you grow further, then add more data, because we can easily be overwhelmed by having to ask for 1,000 data points, and then you don't even know what to do with it. You don't even know what relevance or what correlation you can establish. And to establish that correlation, it will take a lot of time, right? And so why do that now when you're still, I mean, you're still building up your base, and you have 3 other top banks that you can get a market share from.
Good points over there, Paolo. Thanks for sharing. Moving along to Rachel. Rachel, any thoughts on this?
So we have, I mean, data analytics is our largest, I would say, outside of the engineers team at Tyme. And the way we do this is we get a lot of data from our customers. We also get data through our partnerships with our retail stores. And then what we do is we create cohorts. So we look at the cohort is a month. So everyone who onboarded in a specific month, and then we track how that cohort behaves and looks at different products. It's quite interesting. Now we can predict that it's month 6, this will happen, or month 11, this will happen, or 19 months, this will happen. And that's been quite interesting to see what is going on. And this has been in Tyme Bank. Unfortunately, I mean, one of the things that we've realized, and we know deeply, is the challenges of COVID that our customers have faced. And so we've done different things to help along with that process because we can see how incomes have been affected in South Africa and thought ways to do that. We also, because of the data and because of COVID, have worked to amend our processes for those receiving government grants, like, for example, COVID grants. We have changed some of the ways in which we engage so that those customers can also onboard easily with us, because some of the actual onboarding required at one point a wet signature in the government offices. And so we worked with the government on how to do that. But I think, we see alternative data as super important. And actually, when we look at the store and when we partner with our retail stores, like things like people, how they change, if they change their shampoo, if they change their toothpaste, these things sound like really little things, but actually can be quite predictors of changes in personal situations. And so we have spent enough time that we know what to look for in terms of specific examples to think about how to build products or to how to engage with our customers, because we know what is going to be happening based on different things that we've seen before. And we think that's quite important in terms of kind of building new products and services. The area that we're going into next is our sole proprietors. So, for example, we've launched soft POS, where you can just click phones together to pay. So sole proprietors don't need to have the POS machine. But also what we've realized, and this is in South Africa, and this is in the Philippines, and this is in all throughout Asia, is this whole concept of side hustle. And actually, I think during COVID, people really got into their side hustle. Some people even decided to do their side hustle as their main hustle. But there's lots of people with a side hustle, and that's engaged with selling, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook Messenger, TikTok. There's a lot of social selling that's going on, and this is really big in the Philippines. So what we've designed is some special products and services that we'll be bringing in, first in South Africa and then in the Philippines, to actually assist those social sellers. And we think it's really going to be interesting to see how those kind of side hustles and that engagement through social media and selling on social media actually with special products enables the incomes of those people to go up.
That's really fascinating, like data points from the products they use and social selling and designing products around that. Really interested to see what you guys would be launching in a couple of months when Time does go live. Interesting stuff. Thanks for sharing, Rachel. Let's move back to Eugene. Eugene, how is data being utilized?
On data, in my previous roles before I joined RCBC, one exciting thing that we experimented on over a period of 2 years was alternative data, credit scoring using alternative data. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, but the quick discovery was once you have one set of data and you add another set plus another set, the level of accuracy, if I want to use that word, improved significantly. But beyond that, beyond data that you can get from outside, I agree with Paolo. It's you have enough data internally that you can use. In fact, in our case, our current obsession is perfecting our credit scoring, right? In a way that using internal data, in a way that even before a customer comes to us to say, I want an auto loan, we are already ready to give him that credit facility. In fact, once we perfect that, and we're already starting to do this, once we perfect that, it's like turning the turnaround time or the service level agreement upside down. In the past, in the Philippines, for example, the standard for auto loans is anywhere from 4 hours to 2 days. Imagine if we can do it in 30 minutes, or to use Rachel's example, as quick as opening a bank account to 5 minutes. We can do that based on our own data. Unfortunately, we don't have data for everyone, but at least for a significant segment of our customer base, we already have that, and we can use that. And for any new customers coming in, we can just do what my data scientists refer to as look-alike analysis, right? We have 2 million customers who are active. Anybody who walks in might look similar to my 2 million, and we can score them. So that's really, that to me, if we get this done well, can improve the customer experience in customer loans and consumer loans significantly. Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you for that, Eugene. Now, before I move on to closing thoughts, anyone else has anything else to add to this conversation about data? Riddhi, go ahead.
I'll just probably add, one
Sure.
small thing here, which Eugene mentioned, right, in terms of credit and loans. And I think that's where, again, the data is there. Some of the data is there. Some of the data needs to come from external systems like your, your credit scoring engine, or let's say your AML systems. But again, the point that I'm trying to make here is, with all that different type of data that is coming in from different type of systems, what do you eventually do as a bank? You need to decide, right, whether that particular person is eligible for a loan. If yes, what is the parameters of the loan? So going back to what what Paolo was also saying, there's enough data already floating around. I think where banks are struggling today is how do we effectively use that data, that the credit score, that AML score, the spend pattern of the customer, and then use that to then offer that particular customer either a pre-approved loan or something else, which really then goes in terms of how do you cross-sell more, how do you upsell more, how do you increase the revenue of the bank, right? So, I mean, that's just the thought that I was thinking about when Eugene was talking about loans and lending and how can you dish out loans faster, more effectively compared to 30 minutes. Can you do it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Absolutely, yes. The data is there. The decisions need to be made in terms of how do you create those rules, and that's how you can possibly dish out those small ticket loans, unsecured loans in 5, 10, 15 minutes that you're looking for.
Thanks for that, Riddhi. Now, we've unfortunately run short of time now. We just got a couple of minutes. So maybe we can move on to some closing thoughts, and maybe the panelists can share what kind of cool stuff they're working on next towards the goal of driving up customer satisfaction and delight. We'll start with Paolo, we'll go back to Rachel, and then Riddhi, and then back to Eugene. Paolo, go ahead. You have the floor.
Well, there's still this large market that continues to be untapped, right? I'm not talking about the financially untapped. I'm talking about obviously your mass market, and that's a very good market to cater to. But let me link this to the $1 million question of this webinar, right? How to build a digital bank that Filipinos love. And much like when you're courting a girl, you need to establish first: do you like me first? All right. I mean, you can't love me if you don't like me, right? So you need first, I'm talking about the brand. Do you like me first? And secondly, if you love something, you keep on doing it, right? You keep on doing it over and over. And why do you keep on doing it over and over? Because the experience is so good, it's so nice. And therefore, whatever product or service that we offer, we should always go for that unbelievable experience. I don't know how to define it. I don't know how to do that, but at least by knowing the customer, by knowing the person so well, you would be able to come up with that unbelievable experience. So, hope that helps as a closing thought, Vincent.
It's a great note to end on. Thanks for that, Paolo.
Again, thank you for the opportunity, Vincent.
Always glad to have you. Rachel, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited to launch Tyme, and it's going to be coming soon. I think the one unique piece that we haven't talked about is our integration into the rewards program for all the rewards that Go Rewards. That is something special. We have integrated into the Pick and Pay one in South Africa, but it's quite small in comparison to the huge rewards program that is going to be. We're going to be working with that is across all of the different Go Conway JG Summit companies, including Cebu Pacific. And we have a lot of exciting things that we're going to be doing through that reward program. But I can't share that because our CEO, Nate Clark of Tyme, wants all of this to be a big surprise. But we're really excited. We've spent a lot of time looking at what people have really enjoyed in South Africa. And now we'll be really bringing that together with the Go Conways to the Philippines. And if you think about what Filipinos really love in terms of a bank. And I actually asked some Filipinos in Singapore. Some of them didn't understand the question even, which shows that how far we are to actually building a bank that Filipinos love. But I think if you get down to it, it's really about stability, trust, that they know that their money is going to be safe and that they're going to be able to do things and it's not too expensive, and they have accessibility to all the different ways that they want to use their money, a lot of which involves kind of money transfer across different parts of the Philippines, or thinking about credit and really getting into savings, and particularly savings for people's kids and things like that, education. But I just want to end saying that we cannot wait to open Tyme in the Philippines and actually have an operating bank there, and then have a really even more exciting conversation with you then.
Certainly, and my team is also looking forward to reporting on some of these things. So we look forward to the announcement very soon. Thanks for that, Rachel. Riddhi, any closing thoughts for us?
Nothing different from what has been spoken so far, but I would probably add one thing which is slightly tangential to what we have been discussing so far, right? We have three different bankers here and different types of backgrounds of all the three banks. One is a pure digital native bank, the other two more traditional banks, and I'm pretty sure the other banks are also trying to get into that space or have already got into the space. One of my observations, and again, might not be so relevant to Rachel, but more to Paolo and Eugene, is quite often we have seen that the traditional banks, when they're trying to compete with the digital natives like Tyme out here, they often get stuck in terms of, again, what should their strategy be? Should they be building out things on their own with an army of people, or should they be buying things from the market as they exist? Okay, and where we come in and we sort of talk about a slightly different philosophy of what we call as, you don't buy, you don't build. There is a marriage that can happen between the two extremes, what is called as an accelerated build. That if you look at a bank, 70 to 80% of the products and offerings are going to be common between bank A and bank B and bank C. You really cannot differentiate on that 70 to 80%. It's that remaining delta, the 20-30%, where any bank is going to differentiate from the others. And a bank at any given point of time should really focus on how do you build out those 20-30%, which is really going to help you differentiate from the rest of your marketplace. So as I said, it's slightly tangential to what we were discussing. It's more about the execution part of it, but this is something that we strongly believe in, that don't really invest a lot of time in building out that 70%, which is going to be common. Spend time on building out that 20-30% where you're really going to differentiate. And I think that's where we are seeing some banks taking that journey, and probably with RCBC, with PNB, and the other banks in the Philippines, when they're competing with the likes of Tyme and the other so-called new kids on the block, that would probably be our only advice or point of view to them. That's about it.
Yeah, it's always the age-old question, right? Do you build, buy, or rent? But thanks for that closing thought, really. Let's move on to Eugene. Eugene, tell us some cool stuff you're working on, and then some closing thoughts for our audience today.
I agree with what Riddhi said. In the old days, and I meant like 4 or 5 years ago, we used to think of fintechs as our competition, people who are going to steal our lunch. The good news is we're getting great ideas from them, and the partnership between the so-called traditional banks and the fintechs have resulted in I think in a far more productive experience, at least for us 50-plus-year-old bankers. But that's not how I'd like to end. How I'd like to end my part is to mention that while we talk about customer experience, or we talk about love, I keep remembering employee experience. And what we always say here is we cannot expect our employees, including the digital banking and the tech employees, we cannot expect them to love our customers or to create experiences that our customers love if within the bank they hate their experience as customers. Simple things like you need 4 signatures to get a car loan. Things like those, which I laugh about, which we've fixed. I think it's important for us to go back and think about the employee experience, and whether our employees can indeed say that they also love our bank. If we cannot fix that, and I think we have a much, much bigger problem thinking about having our customers love us. Thank you, Vincent.
It's very philosophical. Love comes from within is essentially what it is, right? It must
Yes.
first start with some self-love. Thanks for that, Eugene. With that note, I think it's the perfect note to end the session on. With that, I'd like to thank all the panelists for sharing their views with us today, and all of you folks tuning in from YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We hope you have a lovely rest of the day. Take care now, and bye-bye.
Thank you.